My name's Brian. I'm 46 years old, and I live on the edge of Savannah, in a house I wired with my own hands. Cedar siding, gravel driveway that floods every time the storm drain backs up. Not much of a dream home, but it stood upright when the wind came, and that was enough for me. I've worked as an electrician since I was 19. I don't wear a suit. Don't check emails at dinner. I don't sell you things you don't need. I fix what's already broken. That's always been my job. On and off the clock. Tessa came into my life like someone leaning in from another room. Not quite part of my world, but loud enough to be noticed. Blonde hair. Smelled like vanilla and regret. She had a laugh that felt like it had been missing for a while. Like it forgot how to land. We met at a hardware store. I was there for wire. She was there for something she couldn't name. 6 months later, I moved in. 8 months after that, I put a ring on her finger because I thought building something together would make the foundation stronger. I thought effort meant permanence. But there was always a third presence in the house, her son, Logan. He was 12 when I met him, broad-shouldered for his age, with a stare that didn't belong to a child. He carried himself like he already knew people didn't stick around, always measuring how long you'd last, always calculating exits. He didn't shake my hand when I first met him, just said, "Hey," and went back to his game. Didn't look up. Didn't need to. I wasn't his dad, that much was clear, and he made sure I never forgot it. His real father was a rumor, a faded photo in a cracked leather frame on the hallway shelf. Tessa called him unreliable. Logan called him Dad. Nothing more, nothing less. No details, no stories. Just a title that didn't belong to me, no matter how many late-night school projects I helped finish. No matter how many cleats I bought. No matter how many checkups I sat through in silence while Logan answered every question with a shrug. He let me do things for him, but he never let me in. At first, I told myself he'd come around. That maybe once he saw I wasn't leaving, he'd lower the drawbridge. But every act of kindness just made him suspicious. Like I was staging something. Like I was auditioning. One day, I picked him up from school in the middle of a thunderstorm. Tessa was stuck at work, her phone going straight to voicemail. Logan climbed into the truck, soaked and scowling. "You didn't have to come," he muttered, shivering. "You would have walked home?" I asked. He didn't answer, just cranked up the heater and turned his face to the window. At dinner that night, he said it under his breath, just loud enough for me to hear. "You're just trying to look good." I glanced up. Tessa didn't say anything. She was scrolling through her phone. I waited for her to catch it, to speak up. Nothing. It wasn't the first time. Wasn't the last. That line became his favorite weapon. He used it like a scalpel, carving away at any good I tried to do. "You're just trying to look good." As if kindness were a costume. As if presence meant performance. He was like that all through middle school. And high school made him sharper, taller, quieter. But the contempt aged with him, like wine left to sour in sunlight. By the time he was 16, the distance between us wasn't just emotional, it was structural. He shut doors with intent. He left rooms when I entered. He smiled more at his phone than he ever did at me. And Tessa? She stopped noticing. Or maybe she just stopped caring to mediate. I remember one winter evening, I drove 3 hours to pick him up from a busted tournament where the bus had broken down. Middle of nowhere. Freezing rain. I brought blankets, snacks. He got in the truck without a word. Slept the whole way home. No thanks. No eye contact. Just silence. Tessa kissed his forehead when we got back. "You okay, baby?" she asked. "Yeah," he mumbled. She looked at me and smiled. "Thanks, babe." But I wasn't her babe in that moment. I was the chauffeur, the silent fix. I watched the way she looked at him, how full of softness she became. That softness never showed up for me. The turning point, the true fracture, came on a Saturday afternoon in March. He was 17. The house smelled like reheated leftovers. I had just come in from a 12-hour shift, boots heavy with drywall dust, hands dry and cracked from the cold. Logan was in the kitchen, shirtless, leaning against the fridge like it owed him something. I said, "Can you take the trash out?" He didn't move. Tessa was at the sink, back to both of us. I said it again, this time firmer. Logan, trash. He rolled his eyes, grabbed the bag, and on his way out, muttered loud and clear, "You're always trying to be the hero. It's pathetic." That word, pathetic, sat in the air like the sound of something snapping. Tessa didn't flinch, didn't scold. She turned off the faucet, wiped her hands, and said, with that same shrug she used for every bruise I never let show, "He's a teenager. He's going through stuff." That's what she always said, when he cursed at me under his breath. He's a teenager. When he left the house without telling anyone. He's a teenager. When he stopped coming to family dinners and started referring to me as Brian instead of stepdad. He's a teenager. It was the shield she hid behind, and the cage I was supposed to stay inside. But that day, something inside me shifted. Subtle, slow, like rust eating its way through steel. I stood there in that kitchen, the sink still dripping, the fridge humming its lonely tune, and realized something. I was the only one still trying. Not trying to control, not trying to replace, just trying to exist in a home that had already assigned me my ceiling. No matter how much I gave, they had already decided what I was worth. And I started asking myself a question I wasn't ready to answer. If no one sees you bleed, does it matter that you're the one bleeding? The truth is, there wasn't one big moment. No shouting, no slammed door, just erosion. Slow and silent, like a leak behind drywall you don't notice until the mold spreads. He'd gone off to college that fall. State school 2 hours out. I helped him move, packed the van, carried boxes, paid the first semester up front. He never said thank you, not in the truck, not when I lifted the mini fridge up 3 flights of stairs. Tessa stood in his dorm room doorway, misty-eyed, snapping photos like it was a wedding. Logan hugged her, looked right through me, said, "Thanks for the ride," as if I were a Lyft driver. On the drive back, Tessa scrolled through her camera roll. "He's growing up so fast," she said. I didn't respond. I stared out at the road, the gray sky, the exit signs, the silence between us growing louder with every mile. Back home, I told myself things would get better, quieter at least. The house was less hostile with him gone. I could cook without being judged. I could sit in the living room without pretending not to exist. I even caught myself laughing once, out loud, while watching an old sitcom rerun. Tessa looked at me like I'd spoken in a foreign language, like joy was something I wasn't entitled to anymore. She missed him, obviously. She talked about him constantly, showed me texts he sent her, memes, photos of campus food, pictures of his new haircut. "He's adjusting so well," she'd say. I'd nod, pretend to care. But all I saw in those pictures was proof. He was living just fine without me. Then came the car trouble. It was early October. Tessa had to meet a client in town. Some real estate deal she'd been chasing for weeks. She took her car across the bridge like always, but halfway over, it died. Just stopped. Battery gone. Hazard lights on. She called Logan first. He didn't answer. Then she called her ex, his father. Straight to voicemail. Third call? AAA. They needed the card on file. My card. The alerts started rolling in. For missed calls. 3 voicemails. 2 texts. 1 final message. "Brian, please. I'm stranded. I need your help." I was home, sitting on the couch. TV off. Phone face down. I saw the calls. Watched them come in like waves hitting a shore I no longer wanted to protect. And I let them roll back out. I didn't go. I didn't answer. I didn't lift a finger. Because something inside me had already snapped months before, and this was just the silence echoing back. You can't play the hero when the story's written without you. She got help eventually. Towed the car herself. Called a friend, maybe. I don't know. I didn't ask. That night, she came home without saying a word. Dropped her keys on the counter. Went to bed early. No fight. No questions. Just the kind of silence that doesn't beg for explanation, it demands it. But I gave her none. Instead, I waited until morning. Made coffee like usual. Packed a duffel bag, clothes, tools, documents. Grabbed Logan's old backpack from near the fireplace. He'd left it there 2 years ago. Still had his name on it. Still smelled like him. I don't know why I took it. Maybe as proof that I'd tried. Maybe as evidence that I'd carried more than I should have. I left before she woke up. Didn't leave a note. Didn't slam the door. Just closed it behind me like it was someone else's. Rented a one-bedroom near the strip mall off Route 80. Peeling paint. Water stains on the ceiling. Nothing pretty. But it had locks. It had silence. And it didn't look at me like I was a disappointment. The first night alone, I didn't cry. I didn't drink. I just sat in the kitchen under a flickering bulb, staring at the tiled floor, listening to the hum of a refrigerator that didn't need me. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel watched, judged, measured. I felt blank. There's a kind of peace that comes after detachment. Not happiness. Not relief. Just absence. Like a limb you no longer have to carry. Like being underwater so long that silence starts to feel like air. Tessa didn't call. Not that first day. Not the second. I don't know if she thought I was blowing off steam. I don't know what she told herself. Maybe that I needed space. Maybe that I'd come back once I cooled down. But I didn't leave because I was angry. I left because I was done. Done filling in for a man who never showed up. Done paying for loyalty that was never mine. Done pretending I was part of a family that only wanted what I could give. Not who I was. There was no climax. No argument. No dramatic goodbye. Just a final withdrawal of presence. They say most endings aren't loud. They're quiet. A drawer that never closes. A phone that stops ringing. A dinner that gets cold. That's how mine happened. Not with rage, but with stillness. I didn't block their numbers. I didn't burn photos. I didn't curse the past. I just stopped answering. 2 days passed before I heard from her. Just a text. No punctuation. Can you help cover Logan's tuition? That was it. Not how are you? Not why did you leave? Not even a half-hearted apology. Just a request. Clean. Cold. Like nothing had broken. Like I was still on payroll. I stared at the screen for a long time. Let the words rot there. That's what it felt like, rot. A slow, crawling decay spreading from a single sentence. I thought about replying with rage. Thought about spelling out all the ways I had bent for that boy. The money. The time. The goddamn effort. But then I realized she already knew. She knew exactly what I gave. And she had made her choice. Silence when I was being dismantled, and a handout when I finally stepped back. So I replied, I'm not the hero in your story anymore. She didn't answer after that. No protest. No follow-up. Just silence. But that was only the beginning. A week later, Logan messaged me. It was short, sharp, like a blade in my ribs. You bailed because you couldn't handle it. I stared at that sentence until my jaw ached from clenching. You couldn't handle it. The irony was almost poetic. For years, I handled everything. Every unspoken resentment. Every slammed door. Every unpaid bill and missing father and rotten attitude. I carried it like a backpack full of wet cement. Day after day. No praise. No acknowledgement. Just a quiet expectation that I'd always show up. And the first time I didn't, I was the one who failed. I didn't reply. I let the words hang in digital space. I wanted him to sit in that silence. I wanted him to feel what I'd felt for years, the absence of effort. But reality doesn't need replies. It does the speaking for you. 3 weeks after I left, a letter came to my new place, redirected from the old address. Official looking. Heavy paper. Return address from the university. I knew before I opened it. Academic probation. Missed payments. Risk of suspension. A breakdown of tuition costs I was no longer covering. I scanned the figures. My name wasn't anywhere. Just Logan's. No guardian. No emergency contact. Just a signature line left blank. They had removed me from the paperwork. Just like they had from everything else. The next day, another message from Logan. This one was different. Now I know what alone feels like. No insults this time. No posturing. Just a sentence that finally sounded real. Like the first breath after drowning. But I didn't respond. Because truth isn't something you deliver in comfort. It has to settle in the gut, like a stone. I imagined him sitting in his dorm room, the silence of that unpaid tuition louder than any lecture. His friends moving forward, his future stalling. And maybe, just maybe, he looked around and realized that the man he mocked was the one who had been holding the ground together. That's the thing no one tells you. When a man like me leaves, it doesn't explode, it collapses. Quietly, like a lung giving out. The next week, I got another text. From Tessa. The school says he's going to lose his spot unless something's paid by Friday. Can we talk? That we was doing a lot of work. I stared at the message. Imagined her pacing the kitchen. Maybe Logan finally told her the truth. Maybe the ghost of his real dad still hadn't picked up the phone. Maybe she finally saw the cost of her silence, and how much she'd gambled by letting me go. I didn't write back, because the time for talking had passed. What would I say? Yes. Let's talk about how you watched me rot for years in your house? Let's talk about how you never once pulled Logan aside and said, "He's trying, you little bastard, and you'll show some respect?" She never did that. Not once. I remember one night, years back, I came home late from a storm job, power lines down all over the county. I hadn't slept in 23 hours. My legs were shaking. My back was on fire. Logan was on the couch, feet up, watching a movie I didn't recognize. I said, "Can you help your mom with the dishes?" He didn't even turn around. Just said, "Why don't you do it?" Tessa stood there, heard it, said nothing. That's the memory I thought about when her message came in. Not the birthdays. Not the vacations I paid for. Not the holidays where I hung lights while Logan watched from the window like I was the hired help. No, I remembered the nights I begged for basic respect and was met with shrugs. I let Friday pass without answering. Tuition deadline came and went. The next Monday, another letter arrived. This one sharper. Official suspension notice. Logan was no longer enrolled. No grace period. No appeals. He was out. The collapse was no longer hypothetical. And still no apology. No one said, "I'm sorry." No one said, "I was wrong." They wanted me to save them without admitting I was ever worth a damn. And that's the thing. You can't expect rescue without reverence. They wanted the money, the structure, the safety, but not the man who gave it. They wanted the castle, but mocked the hands that laid every brick. That week, I started sleeping better. Not out of joy, but certainty. A kind of peace that comes when you stop trying to earn love with labor. I'd wake up at 6, make coffee, sit on my small balcony facing a dead parking lot. No trees, no view, just concrete. But it was mine. No one rolled their eyes when I walked into the room. No one sighed when I asked a question. No one used me and called it family. I was alone, and I was finally free. A month later, one more message came. From Logan. No greeting. No sarcasm. I didn't understand. I get it now. I stared at it for a long time. There was a part of me, the part that still remembered the 12-year-old who cried when his goldfish died, that wanted to reply. Just to say I know. Just to let him know I hadn't stopped caring. But then I remembered the 17-year-old in the kitchen. You're always trying to be the hero. It's pathetic. That's what killed it. Because here's the truth. A hero doesn't show up to applause. He shows up in spite of the silence. But even heroes need air. And after years of holding my breath in that house, I finally chose to exhale and walk away. You want to call that abandonment? Fine. I call it survival. It's quiet here now. I rent a place just past the inlet, where the water moves like it's carrying secrets. One bedroom, cracked blinds, and a porch that overlooks nothing but fog and power lines. It's not beautiful, but it doesn't ask anything of me. That's become the most valuable currency in my life, silence without expectation. Some mornings I make coffee and just sit. No texts, no slamming doors, no sighs behind a screen, just me. And the hum of a world that no longer needs me to prove I belong in it. They never called again. Not really. Logan's last message, "I get it now," stayed unread for months. I didn't delete it, didn't reply either. Just let it rot in my inbox like fruit that no one came back to claim. Tessa never followed up after the tuition deadline. I think she knew there was nothing left to salvage. She'd spent too many years pretending not to see me drown. And when I finally stopped treading water, she acted like I owed her an apology for letting go. But here's what no one says. When you stop showing up, the silence you leave behind becomes its own form of justice. Because when the man who did everything finally does nothing, the echo rings louder than a scream. I heard Logan dropped out, moved back home, got a job at the grocery store down by the exit ramp, bagging groceries for people who still call him Kid. I imagine him standing there in that blue apron, counting hours, wondering how it all slipped through his fingers. I wonder if he ever thinks about the man who paid for his start. The man who stood in the shadows while he chased a life built on someone else's sweat. Probably not, because regret only grows in silence. And I've given him plenty of that. Tessa still lives in the house I wired. The house where I replaced every outlet, every switch, every fuse box. I remember the sound of drywall splitting when I pushed wires through it. The way she smiled when the lights finally worked in the back hallway. She used to say, "It's like you brought the house back to life." Now she lives in it without me. Funny, isn't it? All that light and not an ounce of warmth. I don't hate her. I want to, but I don't. Hate would mean I still expected something. And I've spent the last year killing every expectation that ever turned me into a doormat. I gave her years, paid for the braces, the sports fees, the gas money, every scraped knee and forgotten lunch and broken bike chain. And every time I asked for just a sliver of respect, she handed me excuses. He's just young. He's going through a phase. You're being too sensitive. I wasn't sensitive. I was tired. Tired of being the ghost in my own story. People talk about love like it's this redemptive thing, like it can fix the cracks. But love without respect is just a leash. And for years, I walked with that collar around my neck, dragging a family that never once looked back to see if I was bleeding. So I let go of the leash, and I walked the other way. There were nights after I left where the guilt crept in. I won't lie about that. Nights when I thought about his voice, younger, softer, asking me to play catch, asking me for help on a science project. Those early days before the weight of bloodlines turned everything into a ledger. But guilt is just love that's been manipulated. And once you name it, you don't owe it anything. The truth is, I stayed longer than most men would have. I showed up for birthdays his real father forgot. I sat through parent-teacher meetings where I wasn't listed on the form. I cheered from the bleachers while he pretended not to see me. I was there, in every way that mattered. And when he stood in the kitchen and told me I was trying to be the hero, that I was pathetic, he wasn't just lashing out. He was showing me who he was, and who I'd always been in his eyes. Expendable. That word lived in my skin like a splinter. It itched every time I opened my wallet. Every time I let disrespect slide. Every time Tessa smiled at me like I was supposed to just keep enduring. But I don't endure anymore. I draw lines. That's what this place taught me. That sometimes being a hero doesn't mean saving anyone. Sometimes it means stopping the rescue. Because the more you save someone who doesn't see your value, the more you teach them that you don't have any. I had to unlearn that. The hard way. People tell me now, friends, old coworkers, that I look lighter, that I don't carry that old weight anymore. They ask what changed. I just say this: I stopped bleeding for people who never learned how to bandage. Let them figure it out now. Let Logan sit with his dropout status and his part-time job and wonder why the world feels colder. Let Tessa scrape together tuition money from a man who only shows up when it's convenient. It's not revenge. It's education. They had a man who gave without asking, who stayed when it got hard, who chose their family even when they didn't choose him back. And now they know what happens when that man disappears. I've thought about deleting the texts, wiping the photos, scrubbing my name from their history like they did to me. But I don't need to erase anything. The past isn't a wound, it's a record. Proves I was there, that I gave, that I tried. Let them deny it if they want. Truth doesn't need agreement. It just needs memory. And I remember everything. The birthdays, the braces, the nights spent fixing the plumbing because we couldn't afford a contractor. The whispered thanks that never came. The eyes that looked at me like furniture. The woman who loved her son so much, she let him destroy the man who raised him. I remember all of it. And that's why I don't go back. Not to the house. Not to the messages. Not to the role they wanted me to play until it stopped being convenient. I still keep Logan's backpack. The one he left near the fireplace 2 years before I walked out. It's torn at the zipper. Smells like old wood smoke and sweat. I keep it in my closet. Not because I miss him, but because it reminds me who I was. I was the man who carried him. Literally, figuratively, financially, emotionally. And when I finally set him down, he crumpled. That's not on me. That's what happens when you build a life on the shoulders of a man you refuse to see. So now I ask you, whoever's listening, was I wrong? Was I cruel to draw a line after years of giving? Was I heartless to watch them fall and refuse to catch them? Or was this the price of being invisible too long? Would you have stayed? Would you have kept paying the bill after being told your name didn't belong on the receipt? Tell me this. Is a man still a father if the family refuses to call him one, but never stops taking what he gives? Or is he just the hero they keep around until the fire's out? Because if that's what I was, then maybe walking away was the only heroic thing I ever did.